right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Quickly, just to start off, we'll kind of introduce our panel. So first off, I'm David, founder of Connect, former congressional staffer, worked in communications on the Hill for about 3 years before starting Connect in 2022 to focus on just building community and professional development for congressional staffers. So enough about me. First off, let's talk about Sarah. Would you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Sara Fagen. I'm the founder, one of the founders, and the CEO of Tunnl. We are an analytics firm. We actually don't serve partisan political candidates, but our lineage is very much that. And we have a sister company, Deeproot Analytics, which does do work on the center right, and was really been one of the main analytics firms on center right candidates for many years now. So have a wide background in building companies, data, and in campaign politics, and served President George W. Bush as his political director in the second term. So happy to be here.
Very cool. Thank you. And now we've got Andrew Markoff. Would you mind giving us a quick rundown?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Great to see everyone here. My name's Andrew. I've been working in politics in some variety or another for almost 12 years now, my entire professional life. I'm a vice president at 3 Point Media, a Democratic-aligned paid media company who do television, digital advertising. Last election cycle, I ran paid media analytics for the Biden-Harris campaign. So I was tasked with using advanced analytics, or sometimes not advanced analytics, to find the question or the answer to the literal billion-dollar question of how to spend the voluminous resources that we had on that campaign. And I've worked in many roles in politics, but many of them associated with data and analytics, whether it's field fundraising or a bunch of other campaign functions. So happy to talk about all of that with you all today.
What was your budget on the campaign?
Almost $1 billion.
We need that kind of budget at Connect. Things would be very, very fun. But that's great, man. Thank you guys so much for being here. Obviously, data and politics is not new, but it's kind of newer as a posh topic and something that's super important to informing campaigns and making sure you're spending money in the right place. So over the last couple of years, over the last decade, how have you seen analytics kind of change the political messaging world?
Well, I mean, in the last decade, I think quite dramatically, and really even over the last 20 years. So, if you sort of start, the 2004 was the first cycle at the presidential level where I think analytics was done in a multifaceted way. We were using it for media, we were using it for digital. Keep in mind that was pre-social, and then of course the Biden campaign in the Obama campaign in 2008 with Facebook, and then following that was TV targeting. And now I think the biggest difference is the data leaders on these campaigns have real seats at the table and are really driving decisioning in almost all aspects of the campaign, at least a significant input in all decisions of the campaign. It's not just we check a box and we have someone who does that and we look at it, but really it's the old line media guy making all the decisions in the pollster, and those kids in the corner are just it's a real discipline, and it ensues every aspect of smart campaigns.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, do you have a take there?
No, I think that's exactly right, and very well said. The only thing I would add is, even folks who don't work in an analytics department now need to have more of that vocabulary. And the discussion, the way that we discuss campaign decision-making, I think is much more analytically driven across the board. People know that they can expect when you run digital advertising to see impressions and frequency and reach. When you are advertising on television to talk about ratings points or whatever your measure of the future might be. So the vocabulary is more widespread. And then I think that the point that Sarah made about seat at the table is really profound. Like when I started on the first campaign I did, analytics on, our team was fairly confined to working on field organizing, which is a, very high impact vertical, but the idea that there would be analytics staffers assigned to media, I think, is a more recent invention, and that the media team itself would have to think about analytics regardless of how they were staffed. It's just inescapable now.
So take us inside the campaign a little bit. This most recent campaign for Kamala, what were the conversations like? What were the key metrics that you were looking for in that process? How often were you talking with your team about these things? Just give us a quick picture of that.
Yeah, I think, the problem that every campaign, political campaign, but every commercial advertiser is going to face, this year, next year, we faced it last year, we'll face it for decades to come, is the fragmentation of media, the inability to reach people at scale the way that we used to. And so that's the fundamental problem that everyone's going to have moving forward. And so every discussion about how we talked to voters, we tried as hard as we could to bring data into answering the question of where do people spend their time? And I know that's something we're going to talk a lot about, in the next few minutes. But if you don't have an understanding of where people consume content now, you can't sell them anything and you can't convince them who to vote for. And so that was where I think we were able to add a ton of value on last year's campaign, and where I think analytics will continue to add value, especially as the number of platforms multiply, as the quality of data that we get gets higher.
So obviously the markets are so niche these days, and everyone has their podcast that they listen to or their YouTube channel. What were some of those kind of broader mass appeal moments where both of you have realized in recent years where you had one of those moments we just reached so many people? What were those kind of shocking, wow, people actually still do watch Sunday Night Football or whatever it is?
Lots of people watch Sunday Night Football, and lots of people watch a lot of sports. So when you think about TV buying, it is often, 20 of the top 25 programs. So that's a real thing in terms of thinking through how you reach people. And of course that programming, particularly the NFL, is very expensive. So, but it's really the analytics that allow you to figure out where is the NFL watcher I want to see, because there's no monolithic person or monolithic group. They are moving around into a lot of places. So how do I find those people in other places, and how do I find them cheaper? And that's where, if you have the right data and the right analytics tools, you can figure out where to locate voters in an efficient way. And I think it was the biggest problem when we set up Deeproot that we were trying to solve for, is paid media, specifically TV advertising, is the largest line item in the budget by a wide margin, and is the least data-driven. And that has changed, but there's still much more to unlock there.
Yeah, I think, just looking around the audience here, many folks may not remember these days or have been alive yet, but not too long ago, there were basically 4 television channels, the major broadcast networks, and you could reach almost all Americans or Americans who had a television in their household by buying advertising on CBS, NBC, ABC, or Fox. They'd have really popular shows. They'd have the nightly news. Of course, they'd have live sports. That is no longer the case. While there's still, large segments of the American populace that consumes those programs, there's much larger segments that don't watch broadcast television, that don't watch cable television. And as I'm sure many people, in the audience can attest to personally, have a curated media diet that's pretty specific to who you are as a person. So the question of how to efficiently reach people is the literal billion-dollar question of political advertising now. You can't just buy those same 4 networks. But one thing that Sarah's definitely right about is if there's anything that unites Americans anymore, it is live NFL football.
Yeah, that's really it. I mean, obviously Amazon is investing in the NBA and then also in the NFL. Between sports and maybe high profile political moments of State of the Unions, debates, stuff like that, there really aren't too many collective moments in American history that we share together anymore. And I find that to be a bummer. It's kind of fun all being in the same place. Did you guys watch The Office last night? That's not a thing anymore. And so how have you adapted to this new world? And sorry, real quick question. on the audience side, so when you are like hearing from providers and they're trying to pitch you on paid media through them, like what are those certain audience attributes that you're looking for? Or is it consumption habits? Is it demographics? Like what are the key things that you're trying to find?
So, I mean, our whole company is built around building audiences. So, we don't purchase media. We are a tech and audience layer to move data to media buyers, as well as organizations that are engaged in sort of understanding the insights around the audience. And so we are really focused on figuring out, where do we find them? How do we help the client understand where they are consuming media, which is an important piece. How are they consuming it, particularly from a video and a visual perspective, which is on there's still no substitute for the big screen in your living room, but many people are not watching network, they're watching streaming, or they're watching a combination of things that is, I agree, highly curated. And so are they primarily connected TV viewers? There's still 50% of the country still on linear TV.
Wild.
And it's gonna, there are people today with an AOL email address. It's gonna go on
I think one of you signed up for the event and I was like, whoa.
It is, and that may have just actually ended, but you'll still run into people with a Hotmail email address as an example. So this will go on for a long period of time, and it'll continue to rapidly decline. But at some point, when there's 30% of the population on linear, and then everyone else is individual streaming or series of other platforms, that's still going to be a factor in your buy, and so it needs to be data-driven. So a lot of it is around, how do I parse my budget? And then, of course, from a digital perspective, everything is individual. It's a one-to-one relationship, and you're trying to marry a one-to-one relationship in a series of platforms with varying identity, challenges, abilities, connective tissue, so to speak, with a one-to-many medium, and to say, okay, how do I do this efficiently? And so a lot of the tools that we have are around supporting the buyers who do that. And then, of course, we have a whole survey research arm that builds the audiences. That is an automated process that helps. And we're very anti-demographic. Not that demographics aren't useful to know, but,
You're guessing, right? You're making assumptions about a group.
Correct.
Yeah.
We want to know, are you an energy supporter? What kind of information do you consume? Where do you consume it? And then a whole host of other things about them. And that's how we would craft an audience. We would be very much against saying, oh, here's a group of women, here's a group of seniors, here's a group of African Americans. The world is much more complex, and those audiences are much more complex. Most people still buy that way.
Yeah.
Most.
And we have the information to see the individuals inside of those groups and which way they swing.
Right.
So why not
Right.
target off of that?
Correct, right.
Andrew, any thoughts there?
Yeah, the one thing that I think about as someone who's managed campaigns and worked in different levels of the ballot, sometimes you have to do the best that you can with the resources available to you. And you always have to do that, whether that's, a presidential size budget or a state Senate race or whatever it might be. And I think what analytics does, and why it's so, in my opinion, transformative that campaigns and party committees and other organizations have embraced analytics, is because it helps you make those decisions to kind of do the most with whatever budget or level of resources that you have. And so whether it's the type of analytics Sarah's talking about, which is the most cutting edge and advanced technology that's really available to us now, or even the simplest looking at a report from a YouTube buy and using the video completion rate to try to optimize that. Anything we can do to kind of give us a little bit of an edge is really important. And where this really becomes difficult is just there's so much available. Like Sarah was saying, there's so many platforms that you can advertise on. Those platforms all have different analytics. They have different device graphs and social graphs for linking people's identities to the sort of advertising unit and how you connect to them and purchase them. And the more that you try to tie these things together, which is increasingly becoming a necessity if you're going to do cross-platform advertising, the more confusing it gets. In some ways, like I think many people, oftentimes myself included, yearn for the days of 4 networks, because at least then there was only so many options and there was like one firm that did all the reporting. Now it's, you will never see the end of it.
What are some of the like providers that have like sneaky good analytics?
Do you mean like the platforms?
Yeah, platforms, providers like streaming networks, whatever it may be, where you're like, oh wow, they like have their stuff together. Like they give really good feedback. I'll start.
It's sort of like standard. I mean, to a degree, it's sort of standardized now, but it's like mixing them together is kind of the tough challenge.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge is I see a lot of this in the audience space is someone be like, we have a brand lift study, and the brand lift study shows our creative performed. I've never seen a brand lift study from a platform that didn't show that the creative worked ever once. Shocking. So, it's when you grade your own paper, it's not surprising that you give yourself a good grade. So I think that is, one of the challenges that we spend a lot of time thinking about is like, how do we pull this all in and say, did this move? And, we like survey-based audiences. We could spend a whole panel on survey research and how it's changing and the flaws in it, but is that if you know who you're trying to reach and you have tight control over ads going to that group of people, then you have the ability to say, did the campaign move those people? Did the creative move those people? Did the collective environment allow for those individuals to hear that message, see that creative, and make a judgment in one way? And I find that to be a more effective way to look at it, but it requires budget and sophisticated team to study it and manage it. So,
and on the hiring side, like obviously you're looking for data proficiency, right? But what for these students who are wanting to come work for you guys one day, what is that thing on their resume that's going to stand out that shows, okay, they get it, like they're above the rest? Or what are you looking for on a resume to see someone as qualified these days?
Do you want to take a crack at that? And I've got some thoughts I'll share.
Yeah, and we might come at this from slightly different angles too. Like I still work primarily in electoral politics. For me, I actually think that the sort of the technical skills, a lot of that can be learned. What you can't teach is like what a political campaign is like. And many of you, I'm sure, have been exposed to this. Or if you're like working on the Hill, there's many similarities. But the sort of pace and expectations around completing your work, getting things done quickly, the sort of like, and the context that you come to understand about why it's so important to figure out how to spend whatever amount of money it is. Like once you see how it's raised, once you see how a candidate for office spends their time, once you see like how heated this decision-making can get and how high stakes it can feel, then I think you have the background and the context that you need to develop, the skills, whether it's like very complicated data science skills or more like my speed, which is like I know how to use a spreadsheet. But the background is irreplaceable in my mind. So when we were hiring, for example, for the Harris paid media analytics team, there were 7 people who worked in my department, and it really helped the people who I ended up hiring if they had worked on a campaign before. Not everyone, but it was very, very helpful.
So I think I look at it as like twofold. On one set of categories, like, what are the raw skills we need? Like at this point, being able to code in Python and knowing R, that is table stakes for a lot of the jobs that we're hiring. And I think a lot of kids coming out of school are having at least some basic experience in that. But, we now give everyone basically a test. So you got to pass the test before we'll even look at you in terms of coming to work for us. Then you get into the more, I agree, more in some ways more important skills which are the softer skills, which is, you know, we still look for work ethic and character, and, you know, we have this on our wall in our office in terms of one of our values, curiosity, which is like, do you have a lot of gumption? Are you going to go solve a problem? Are you going to dive in and figure it out, or ask somebody? Or are you going to sit and stare at the computer all day when you don't know the answer? And like, that's really what I'm trying to solve for, because I need the former. Because this is hard work, it's complicated, and you know, we need doers, you know.
For sure. I've been that person, both sides. Like, I've been the one at an internship where I'm like, I'm just going to stare at this computer and not ask questions. Surprisingly, that did not get me anywhere. And when I'm curious, it can lead to jobs and you move up. But I want to take a step into political audiences for a second. I want to get your opinion on where you are seeing audiences these days. But first, what is like the misconception that DC political media still has of like, this is where people consume political content?
I would say that there's almost no great answer and there's no wrong answer, but it's not just the Sunday shows. It's not only by Fox News if you're looking for conservatives. You might only buy Fox News if you're trying to reach Donald Trump, which a lot of people spend money doing. But, you know, even for elites, like we do surveys of elites in Washington, the policymaker types that everyone's trying to reach. And that is a very diverse list. And so you can't just buy Axios. You can reach a large segment of them on Axios, but you need to also buy the Post and also buy the Journal and also buy a lot of things if you're trying to reach the full. And then that gets expensive. So then you're back into the conversation about trade-offs. Like, you know, I'm really only going to reach a percentage of the audience I'm trying to reach unless I have an unlimited budget. And then how do you stack rank that? And so I think that there's still art and science to media buying and to reaching people. We tend to just do the science part of it, but you know, it's trying to figure out that you get more deals with the Wall Street Journal, so you go there, as an example. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How is the reporting from somewhere like the Wall Street Journal or a typical kind of DC rag? Like, are they giving you good data on who's reading, or is it one of those like grade your own test kind of worlds?
I mean, I don't buy media, so I don't have to ask that. I have my own analytics that tell me who's watching it, and that's what we would look at. So, no, they all promote themselves in the way you would expect them to promote themselves.
I mean, got to spin, right?
Yeah.
One thing to your other question that was pretty interesting, thinking about it like outside to a different audience, which is like everyone outside the Beltway. I think the answer, well, not everyone, but the vast majority of people, the answer to your question, like what is the misconception about how people consume media about politics, is that they consume it at all. I think, you know, the average American, whatever that may mean, thinks about politics a lot less than anyone in this room, anyone in this building, and probably anyone within a square mile of where we are right now.
For sure.
And once you come to terms with that, which is a very difficult thing to come to terms with, it really helps you think about both content and strategy.
For sure. So from the other side of it now, Andrew, where are people consuming political content? Like, is it YouTube channels? Because Breaking Points is one that comes to mind for me, of like a lot of younger people are going towards the independent media, and I feel like they have it really built out well. Is it Substack? Like, where is it?
I think it's tough to give like one answer to that question, because I think Sarah's been talking about this a lot. Like, who are you trying to talk to is really the key question. You know, when I was younger, the sort of like archetypal swing voter, let's say in like the 2018 midterms, was like a middle-aged, suburban, usually woman, sometimes man, usually like white, suburban, middle ring, outer ring suburbs. You know, in this last election, we saw that shift dramatically towards men, younger men, men of color. And there's always gradations and variation in those things. But as your definition of like a swing voter shifts, you have to start thinking about where those people consume media, because to get back to one of the very first things we talked about, there's not like a universal media consumption pattern anymore. And so as we think about younger voters and more diverse voters, yeah, we are thinking a lot about YouTube, thinking a lot about independent media. We're thinking still about live sports. It's always going to be in the conversation, particularly when you're thinking about men. But the hardest thing is like, when you're a paid media practitioner, the hardest thing is that there's these increasingly large pockets of people who are not advertisable at all. Or maybe, a lot of my colleagues argue, and I think persuasively, that like one of the last ways you can get to them is by sending them mail. Because there's just, if you're someone in your primary content consumption online, you can consume, 8 hours of content a day, but if it's all TikTok plus streaming without ads, or let's say you stream like a Disney property that doesn't allow political ads, it's essentially useless to a political ad buyer. You're not reachable. So one thing I think that paid media practitioners have to come to terms with is like, can we be honest about who's not reachable, and then what is the plan to reach those people, whether you're doing advocacy or campaigns or something else?
It's a really excellent point. We have a score on that as well for every audience, which is, what % of these folks are not reachable on, at least on the big screen. And
Off the grid.
yes, and it's, in most audiences, it's a minimum of 10%, and it depending on the group, it can approach 30, which is an enormous number. And then you start looking at the TV buys, and what we see with our data is that in most TV buys in politics, where they're trying to still jam in 1,200 points in a week or a 10-day period, a third of the audience is just getting crushed with ads. I mean, they're so oversaturated, it is a waste of dollars. And there's this whole middle group that has seen the ad 3, 4, 5 times. And so they haven't seen it enough. They need to see it 2 to 3 or 4 more times. And that's where all the other kind of strategies around YouTube and social and streaming and mail kind of come into play. So we're still a long way away, I think, as a political community from getting that right, but we're at least starting to leverage the data that can get us the information.
Andrew, is there a point where you've targeted someone too much with political ads?
Yes, because I'm not convinced that it caught, I remember being a young canvasser on a race that had a lot of spending on it. And we had paid canvassers and volunteer canvassers, and we were on TV, and we were doing direct mail. And I remember going to people's homes and them being like, I never want to talk to you again. Please get out of my face. Even despite that experience, I'm not convinced that too many ads cause people to vote against you, despite what people say. But it is an incredible waste of money. And money is, in any campaign, you have two, or any endeavor, you have two things, time and money. So wasting one of those things is, if it's not a net negative, it's pretty close.
Very cool. So when we're thinking about like the congressional staffer audience or someone who's looking to get into the political world, what can they be doing to prepare themselves to get into the world that you two are in?
Take a stab at that.
Well, one thing I think is interesting for younger professionals is like people like me don't fully understand how you all consume media. And I'm not saying that's like a skill and like you'll get hired by saying like, come look at my TikTok feed. That's not really a qualification for a job. But I do think like there is, as media changes, and if you're someone who's interested in media, whether it's buying or media strategy or organic and social media, which is, its own sort of ecosystem of jobs and work, you already sort of bring a lot to the table by sort of understanding generationally where this thing is headed. And so I would say like, that's a real power that a lot of us don't have. And thinking about ways to leverage that, understanding like the tools that are available to measure the effectiveness and the reach and the the effectiveness and the reach of like a tool like a TikTok or whatever might come after it, and giving yourself the tools to go into conversations and say like, I know how to leverage these tools or reach these audiences. Like that's really important. A lot of that can come from your own experience or the experience of your peers.
Great.
I think it's a great point. In terms of if you want to get into analytics, start doing it in your day job, whatever that might be. There's information on who's consuming. If you're working on the Hill and you're members, and you're doing comms, you figuring out how many people in an audience that is an important constituency, like we're on that channel, and how do you quantify? How do you start to produce reporting that would inform the decisions that you make about where to do press or how to spend your time, or what's the right precinct to do an event in? I mean, there's just get familiar with the concept and start to look for free data sets or tools.
Yeah.
And I think also we haven't talked about AI yet, but it's going to dramatically change our space and all of the space that we work in. Is just get really familiar with those tools, because they're really important, I think, in any job now, just to make you more personally efficient. But then also, we create a lot of GPTs in our company that are for teams, to make the team's information faster, better, more accurate. So
yeah, absolutely. Like ChatGPT has helped with just crunching data so much.
Yeah.
And the other side of it too is it's good job security. If you're a comm staffer or running social media campaigns, I knew what my metrics were every month, and I tried to show growth over time to show that I was doing my job. So it's a great reason to get into analytics, to prove why you deserve a raise. Thank you so much to the panel, and thank you guys for listening.